John, tell me this. You're saying that Labour now, and we remember the old adverts from the 1980s, Labour isn't working. You're saying that you're now the party to get people from welfare into work. How are you going to do that?
Absolutely, because I'm putting forward serious welfare reforms, because I think there are too many people who are out of work, trapped on welfare, abandoned, going nowhere, and I want to give those people hope and confidence for the future. So I've proposed reforms to the way in which disability and sickness benefits are assessed to deal with the disincentives in the system. I want to shift power and resources to local areas, to put proper support into local areas with training and reskilling that job centres deliver. And when we've got 1 million young people who are workless, and a significant proportion of that are young people who have been out of work for over 6 months, sometimes for a year, I'm saying these young people should be required to go to the job centre more often, to take on training opportunities, because if you're out of work when you're young, you risk a life on the margins, and we've got to get people back to work. In fact, you know, we've got a big plan as an incoming Labour government, if we win people's trust, to grow our economy, to sustainably raise living standards, and part of that is getting more people into jobs and into work. But Jeremy Hunt's got a budget next week. He could implement my welfare reform plan, but if he doesn't, then this is a plan we'll be putting to the public in an election.
Simple question, Jonathan. Are Labour going to put benefits up, or are they going to cut them? Because the welfare bill keeps on going up, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, we're going to be spending £8 billion more on sickness and disability-related benefits. At the moment, that's under the Conservative plans, and I'm saying a lot of people who are out of work, often, look, increasingly now people are out of work for reasons of mental health, for anxiety and depression. For a lot of those people, getting into good quality work will help them with their managing their condition. Now, obviously, work's not going to be right for everybody, and you know, I think we all understand that and accept that. But there are a lot of people who say they want to work. 1.7 million people say they want to work with the right help, but they're not getting any help at the moment. That can't be right.
So you might be cutting benefits.
People into work. Well, I'm saying if you're a young person, you know, if you've been out of work for 6 months, a year, you should be required to interact with the job centre more regularly. And there are conditions attached to claiming unemployment benefits, absolutely. But equally, I know that if you can get people into work, then that means they can build a life, provide a home, save for the future. But in the moment, people are trapped out of work. There are barriers in the system. There are barriers to parents moving into work because of the way in which universal credit operates. So we need to make universal credit work as well. So we've got detailed welfare reform proposals. It's new thinking, new reforms from Labour, which if the government don't introduce and copy my reforms, then the Labour government will.
Let's speak about somebody who is certainly in work. She's in a new job. She's going to be Keir Starmer's new Chief of Staff. How well does Sir Keir Starmer know Sue Gray personally? And how long do you think they've been negotiating for her to take this position after leaving the civil service?
Well, I mean, Sue Gray is a woman of exceptional talent and ability. And I think it shows in the same way that senior business people are now supporting Labour, how seriously people are taking the prospect of Keir Starmer as Prime Minister and a Labour government. And in turn it shows how seriously Keir Starmer is taking preparing for government if the British public put their trust in us. Now, we've had a vacancy.
How well do they know each other, Jonathan?
I don't know the answer to that, but they're not. You know, I don't think they're people who, you know, socialise regularly together or anything like that.
But I think they've known each other for years, haven't they? Apparently.
Well, in as much as Sue Gray is a senior civil servant and Keir Starmer was the country's leading prosecutor, putting villains and criminals behind bars. So he would have got to know her, I'm sure, throughout those years as well. But the key thing is that she is a woman of immense integrity, and it shows how seriously people are now taking the prospect of a Labour government, that someone of that calibre is prepared to come and work for us.
But they're not taking as seriously now her Partygate probe because they think that there's something a bit iffy about her links to the Labour Party. So your party had this great thing. You had an open goal. You were scoring against Boris Johnson. He wasn't saving any of these goals because Partygate incriminated him. And now, because Keir Starmer has chosen Sue Gray as his chief of staff, you've undermined her Partygate report, and you've now made Boris Johnson, rightly or wrongly, look less culpable than he was. That's not good politics.
Look, the only person responsible for Boris Johnson's downfall is Boris Johnson. He was the one breaking the rules while at the same time putting this country into lockdown. As we've seen on the newspaper, you work for, we've seen the scale of what was going on behind the scenes. It's why we need a proper public inquiry, by the way. All those messages need to be passed to the public inquiry, and all needs to be looked at properly. And that inquiry, Rishi Sunak's got to get on with that inquiry. But at the end of the day, it was Boris Johnson breaking the rules. We've seen the photos, and the evidence that's going to the Parliamentary Committee isn't based on Sue Gray's report. It's based on their own witness statements under oath from people who were there. It's based on the WhatsApp and the emails that they have seen, and they think Boris Johnson misled Parliament, or they think he may have misled Parliament.
But where were you then, Jonathan? Because you were Shadow Health Secretary. The lockdown files have revealed that there was virtually no opposition to cavalier decision-making and government via WhatsApp. So where were you? Where was Keir Starmer? Where was the opposition questioning the likes of Matt Hancock? You just followed everything the government came up with hook, line and sinker.
We raised concerns throughout that process. In fact, if you remember, back in March, when we went into lockdown, Camilla, you warned me not to play political games, and you pointed out that I was doing one of my interviews with a vintage Labour poster in my background when I was raising concerns, for example, about the lack of sick pay for people who needed to self-isolate. That was in March 2020. You said the country would not forgive Labour if they play political games with this.
Applying scrutiny and asking questions of governmental decision-making isn't playing political games. You can politicise a pandemic, and that's a bad thing to do. But journalists like me were asking questions. You were Shadow Health Secretary. Why weren't you asking those questions? Instead, you just rubber-stamped everything the government did.
Well, I was.
But you supported all of the government's COVID policy.
That's what your article said in March 2020. No, I was asking questions. I was asking questions about sick pay.
But even later, when the second lockdown, the third lockdown, you weren't questioning it at all, even though there were concerns over the data.
We were. We questioned the failure to protect care homes. We questioned sick pay, as you rightly identified in your article you wrote about me. We questioned the failure around why areas were not getting more vaccination sooner. We questioned why areas like Leicester, which I live in, as you know, and other parts of the country were placed in longer lockdowns. We were raising concerns throughout. But equally, we also knew, or also we took a judgment that if the government and the chief scientific advisors were asking us not to vote against the government's lockdown legislation, then we wouldn't do that, because we didn't want to let the virus rip as some others did. So look, right, this is why all of the messages need to be properly investigated by an inquiry. I think those who have rightly pointed out that other countries have had their inquiries, why haven't we? That's absolutely right. Rishi Sunak now needs to make sure that this inquiry that they get on with it, that we have some form of preliminary report by the end of the year, that ministers hand over all of their messages, that ministers aren't deleting everything, because we do need to learn lessons from what was, in many ways, not entirely unprecedented, because pandemics have hit us in the past, but certainly unprecedented in most people's lifetimes.
But are you saying that you agree with Isabel Oakeshott when she has raised concerns about the inquiry being a whitewash, but also this notion of justice delayed being justice denied then?
I absolutely agree with Isabel Oakeshott on her point about timing. I still have confidence in the people running the inquiry, so I will not associate myself with that bit of her comment, but I certainly agree on timing. We need to get on with this. If other countries have had their inquiries, why haven't we? I mean, I think it took it a year even to get the terms of reference agreed. I mean, that's a nonsense. But we've got to learn lessons. And by the way, look, I totally appreciate people have different points of view on this, and that's quite right. People should have different points of view. But it's why actually, in the end, you need an inquiry to look at all the ins and outs of this. And so we can learn lessons and prepare ourselves should anything awful like this hit us again.
Final quick question, because I know you knew him well and obviously you worked in very close quarters. What should happen to Matt Hancock now? Alison Pearson, my newspaper reviewer, was talking about criminal charges. That might be a bit of a stretch, but how do you think this leaves the former Health Secretary?
Well, gosh, I wasn't expecting that question. Perhaps I should have done. Well, I mean, his political career's over, isn't it? I think the key thing is that he accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts.
Yeah.
Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.